Donald Trump is on Capitol Hill today for the first time since telling his supporters to, quote, fight like hell on January 6th. He's got a packed day. It started this morning with a meeting with House Republicans, and sources inside the room tell us it was a typical Trump performance, bragging about his polls, attacking Republicans who have opposed him, questioning why Taylor Swift would support a Democrat. And we're told he even did an impression of President Biden. Later today, he'll meet with the Senate Republican Conference. Now, CNN's Lauren Fox joins us live from Capitol Hill, who's been outside that meeting. So, Lauren, what are you hearing from what happened inside the room?
Yeah, Manu, it is, as many Republicans put it to us, basically just typical Donald Trump. He really careened from one issue to another, calling out his opponents, including people like Jeff Rowe, a Republican strategist, talking about the differences between him and Joe Biden, but also calling out Republicans who haven't supported him in the past, making clear and sort of boasting that most of the Republicans who voted to impeach him are no longer in Congress. He even called out one member, Representative David Valadao, saying basically that he never really liked him much. So it just shows you that this is not a Donald Trump that has changed from the president that many of these Republicans knew and worked with closely. This is a Republican presidential nominee who is out for revenge. He, of course, according to Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene, talked about the Justice Department, talked about weaponized government. Here's also what she said he poked fun at.
He saw me in there and he was like, hello, Marjorie. He's always so sweet and recognizes me. And he said, are you being nice? He was joking. Are you being nice to Speaker Johnson? And I said, eh. And he said, okay, be nice to him. And I nodded my head.
And obviously, Manu, we have covered the saga of Marjorie Taylor Greene trying to get rid of Speaker Mike Johnson, calling for a motion to vacate, causing so much turmoil in the House Republican Conference. Of course, she there making light of it, saying that Donald Trump sort of poked fun at the situation. He did talk a little bit about abortion during this meeting, making clear to members that they shouldn't be afraid of the issue, that this is now a state's issue, something that Republicans have been fighting for and arguing about for a long time now. But, you know, it was a little light on policy and a lot larger on sort of his revenge tour up here this morning.
Yeah, and something tells me that Marjorie Taylor Greene will not be taking Donald Trump's advice about being nice to Mike Johnson. All right, Lauren Fox out in Capitol Hill. Thanks for that. My great panel is back. So just a little bit more about what he said inside the room. He talked about Steve Scalise after the 2017 congressional baseball shooting. He said when he saw him in the hospital, he said, Steve shows great courage. I saw him in the hospital. I can tell your wife really loves you, Steve, because some wives wouldn't care. He also, as Lauren said,
Which wives?
Yeah, exactly. I'm not sure. He also went after, as Lauren noted, David Valadao, who is one of the 10 Republicans who voted to impeach Donald Trump, said, I never loved him. Of course, they need Valadao to win in November. He went after some of how the other impeachers, as he called them, are no longer members of Congress. And one thing he said, he went after, talked about Nancy Pelosi and some odd comments about her, saying that her daughter once told him that he and Nancy would have had a great romance in another life. And now Nancy Pelosi's daughter put out a statement saying that was a lie. Your reaction, Margaret? Not to that, to everything.
Yeah,
not necessarily that. Everything.
It sounds like classic everything. I think we're all going to be paying a lot of attention to the things that Donald Trump says today and his relationships with lawmakers and him trying to sort of rally the troops around him and remind everyone who's boss. But the real story is probably happening down the street of the Business Roundtable, where he and President Biden, via the president's chief of staff, Jeff Zients, are sort of competing for the hearts and minds and loyalty of American CEOs over issues like junk fees, like antitrust, like post-pandemic recovery, like taxes, like policies that will affect corporate America. And that is actually going to be tremendously powerful in terms, in Donald Trump's case, of a permission structure for kind of old school Republicans who, you know, if Nikki Haley was the nominee, there'd be no question where they were going.
Yeah.
They have a choice now. Like, that is the story.
Yeah, and speaking of which, the hope among Republicans, some Republicans going is that perhaps they talk about a policy agenda. This is what one Trump advisor told CNN. We want everyone to get on the same page, talking about policy, including the economy and inflation. That's the biggest factor in all the polling. It's the biggest thing people are worried about. And then separately, when asked if they believe Trump will discuss policy plans and campaign strategy and while avoiding his grievances, a Republican lawmaker told CNN, "You know the answer to that. It ain't in his DNA." I think the Republican lawmaker was correct here. You know, Trump, the party wants to talk about the issues.
Right,
but for Trump all along, through the entire Trump era, it's been about personal grievances.
Right. They want to get on the issues, and certainly they want to get on the same page when it comes to an agenda. And so much of the walk up to this week was kind of planning for these confabs to kind of sort of start sketching out a 2025 agenda. You know, you had Speaker Johnson speak to Senate Republicans yesterday, kind of start the discussions about what they would do if both Republicans or if Republicans controlled, you know, both all, you know, House, Senate, and the White House. And then Trump comes in, and this, I don't think the quotes that we're seeing coming out of this meeting has surprised any of us. He is not someone who can get focused on substance. He'll talk about Taylor Swift. He'll talk about the DOJ. He'll say things about Nancy Pelosi that I still don't quite understand what he was trying to say there. And this is why you have. This is in part why you have, you know, these apparatuses around him kind of forming that policy for him, because so often when he's in a room with these lawmakers, he's distracted with other things.
But this also just represents, and of course, Trump has had this tight grip over the Republican Party for such a long time, increasingly so, demonstrated, just look at the Senate Republican leader, Mitch McConnell, someone in the immediate aftermath of January 6th said Trump was morally and practically responsible for the attack on the Capitol that day. They have not spoken since December 2020, the aftermath of the Electoral College certifying the victory for Joe Biden. And then Donald Trump went on this blistering crusade attacking McConnell for years, and his wife, in sometimes very racist terms.
Right.
And McConnell now is endorsing Donald Trump. I asked him yesterday about whether he would confront Trump about any of the past things that he said, including past things like this.
President Trump is practically and morally responsible.
There is simply no room in the Republican Party for anti-Semitism or white supremacy. And that would apply to all of the leaders in the party. I've said earlier this year, I support him. He's earned the nomination by the voters all across the country. And of course, I'll be at the meeting tomorrow.
And I asked him if he was going to confront him on any of those issues or discuss any of the bad blood. That was his answer. He's going to support him because there's really just no other place for the Republican leader to be. The anti-Trump wing is almost gone.
Right. Yeah. And listen, it's the reason why he's not going to be the Republican leader anymore, because of the force of Donald Trump and the grip he has on the Republican Party. No, he's not going to confront him there. And he's going to do everything in his power to get Trump in office and to get Trump a Senate that is also a Republican Senate. So, you know, this isn't a surprise. Mitch McConnell is Mitch McConnell. Even though he said some fairly harsh things about Donald Trump in the past, he is completely rallying behind him now. And listen, that has been the story of so many Republicans. Going back to 2016, you saw, you know, some sort of public wondering whether or not they would back him. And then, you know, for years there was, privately, they say all of these things, right, about Donald Trump, but publicly, and, you know, that's really all that matters. Publicly, they support him. Publicly, they back his policies as well. It will be interesting to see what comes out of this business roundtable, as you said, and what kind of fodder that provides. Because you remember, Donald Trump has been before business leaders before and sort of promised to give away the store if he gets backing from them.
But just to get back to your point about just, you know, the people who have been going after him, the people who voted to impeach Donald Trump in the aftermath of January 6th, a lot of them are gone. And Donald Trump made note of that behind closed doors. We're referring to former Congressman Tom Rice and Liz Cheney, who was talking about behind closed doors. They're among the members who are no longer in Congress. There are just two Republicans who voted to impeach Donald Trump who are still members. Dan Newhouse, who was at the meeting, he told our colleague Melanie Zanona going in that he goes to every meeting. David Valadao, who we mentioned, who Trump criticized behind closed doors. Then you look at the Senate, the Republicans who voted to convict Donald Trump in that impeachment trial. 3 of them no longer in Congress. 4 of them are there. A couple of them may not attend because of conflicts that they're not quite explaining what those conflicts are. But that goes to the point here that, you know, those people who are dissenting are either gone or they're staying quiet.
Right. I mean, gradually in the Trump era, we've seen those Republican voices who are willing to speak out, at least in elected office. There are certainly Republicans outside of elected office who are very vocal about their concerns for a second Trump presidency. But if you're in elected office and you're accountable to voters, which means a very active Republican base, the number of Republican officials who are willing to kind of take on Donald Trump is rapidly diminishing. It's not the parties of like the Bob Corkers and the Jeff Flakes and pretty soon Mitt Romney anymore. It's a caucus that includes J.D. Vance, Josh Hawley.
And
that's really what the elected officials of the Republican Party are becoming, because they know the power that Trump holds.